Sorry, the network went off after the connect. So I don't know whether we have gone through all this before now. Do we have any question here before we go to the next one? Any question on what we did on Monday? Do we have question on that? Let me hear from you. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. No question, sir.
No question. Okay, good. So we started looking at the various ways of computing the growth rate if it is not given in the question, right? And we identified two methods of computing the growth rate, which is the interpolation of historical dividend and the use of Gordon's growth model. And when do we use this? And you have to be aware that these two methods will not give the same result, okay? They will not give the same result. If you use Gordon, I will use historical dividend, you will not get the same result, but that is the approach. You don't have to bother yourself if you are getting the different results. It's a matter of formula. So let's see the first one. When do you need to use interpolation of historical dividend? Interpolation of historical dividend. Now, you use this when you are given the dividend payment history of the company over some years. That is, when you are given the past dividend that the company has paid up to the current year, you can use interpolation to get the growth rate in dividend if dividend is growing. Okay, and how do we do that?
What's happening, sir? We can't hear you. I can't hear you from my hand.
Okay, I guess you can hear me now. You can hear me now?
Yes, sir.
No, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Because the network has to switch to another network.
Okay, sir. With this network issue, hope it won't affect the recording, so that it should be lost again or something.
No. It's not affecting it. It's not. Okay.
But the earlier one that you said was lost. I think.
I think what happened was that I paused the recording. Okay, before we started the class, we started it late. So it's like when I started the class again, I forgot to enable it. That's what happened.
Okay.
So
all right, sir.
If you want to use this formula, you have your G, which represents your growth rate, equals to the latest dividend all over latest dividend over earliest dividend okay, all within brackets. You now say raised to power 1 over n, then everything minus 1. Okay, now what do we mean by latest dividend? Let me illustrate this. Let us assume that we have these years, year 2020, we have year 2021, we have year 2022, and okay, no. We have year 2019, we have year 2018, and 2017, and we have year 2016. And the company paid the following dividend in these years. Let's see. Let me assume that the company paid 22 kobo per share here. And here, the company paid, let me say, 18 kobo per share. 18 kobo per share. And here, it paid 17 kobo per share. Here, the company paid, let me say, 13 kobo here per share. And here the company pay 11 kobo per share. Now you see that we're given the dividend payment history of this company from year 2016 up to year 2020. This is what we call dividend history. We're given the past dividend that the company has paid and the current dividend, current year dividend. So we say, oh, you have the dividend history of that company. And if you have the dividend history of the company, you can interpolate to get your dividend growth rate from here. I can get my dividend growth rate. So if I want to use this formula now, I simply say my growth rate is equal to what is the latest dividend? The latest dividend is 22. That is current. Latest dividend means current dividend. Okay, latest, current. Instead of latest, if you so wish, you can use current. So current dividend all over, what's the earliest dividend? The earliest year here is what? Year 2016. And the company paid 11 kobo per share in year 2016. So I said 22 over 11. Okay. All raised to power. Now look at it. This is where student make mistake. If you come from year 2020, from year 2016 to 2020, you tell me that we have 5 years, right? But we don't have 5 years, okay? We are looking at the number of times that your dividend has grown, okay? The number of time that your dividend has what? Has grown. Now, look at it from 2016. From 2016 to 2017 is 1 year. 2017 to 2018 is 2 years. To 2019 is 3 years. To 2020 is 4 years. So it's not going to be 1 over 5. Instead, it's going to be what? 1 over 4. If you give birth to your first child in 2016, and you are now asked, how old is the child in 2020? So the child should be what? 4 years, not 5 years. Did you understand the concept? So now say all this one minus what? Minus 1. Okay? So just pick your calculator. 1 over 4 is sitting at 0.25. So I recommend I use that approach. This power here, always convert it to decimal so that it will be easy for you to punch in your calculator. So 1 over 4 is 0.25. So just punch 22 over 11 raised to power 0.25 and deduct what? Deduct 1 from it. Multiply by 100. So I have 18.9%. Did you get the same thing? I believe you are following. Just take your calculator and do what I'm doing here so that I will be sure you understand what I'm doing. Okay? So punch your calculator and let me know whether you got 18.9%. That is what you should get. Did you have the same thing here? Hello? Okay, send in your okay. Send in what you get through chat. Let me see. Whatever you get, just send it in through the chat room. Mrs. Angela, Mrs. Chinwe, I hope we are together. Yeah, that's correct. So 0.189, when you convert it to percentage, you get 18.9%. Okay, you get 18.9%. Now, this is one way of using the historical dividend interpolation formula. Now, it can come in another way. Let's see this. Let's see this. Assuming the question comes in this way. Okay. The current dividend, I want to frame the questions to illustrate that. The current dividend is 22 kobo, and dividend 4 years ago was 11 kobo. Okay. Now, if you are given a statement like this, you want to use your interpolation formula. Now, you know here, I told you that wherever you have here, for instance, we have 5 here, remove 1 from it. That is where the dividend are listed out in a tabular form like this. But look at this. The question did not list the dividend paid in the second example here. What the question just says is what? The current dividend is 22 kobo, and 4 years ago, the company paid a dividend of 11 kobo per share. So if you want to solve this, the approach we're going to use will be slightly different from this, from the first one we did. To solve this, we are going to have your G is equal to 22 over 11 raised to power what? Raised to power 1 over 4. What is the difference here? What is the difference? Raised to power 1 over 4. You see that in the first one, I subtracted 1 year, but in the second one, I did not subtract anything. That's because the question has already told me that this dividend was 4 years ago. So if I'm in year 2020, and I tell you 4 years ago, 4 years ago should be what? Year 2016. You count backward from 2020. You count 4 years. So 4 years ago from year 2020 should be year 2016. Can you see that? So anytime the question gives you this in a statement form like this, you don't need to remove 1 from the number of years. You just use that number of years like that. Do you understand? So this is going to give you the same thing you have up there, 18.9%. 18.9%. Okay, so this is the interpolation of historical dividend as one way of computing the dividend growth rate. And the second one, of course, is what? Is the Gordon's growth rate or Gordon's growth formula. Gordon's growth formula. Let's look at that. Now, for the Gordon's growth model, Gordon will tell you that, the growth rate of dividend is equal to RB.
Sorry, I have a question.
Okay, ask a question.
But you just said that we don't need to put -1 if we are giving the number of years directly in the question.
Yes, in a statement like this.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in this is your second solution, you put -1 in your notes.
What I'm saying is this. Look at this one. You know, in the first one, how many years do we have?
We have 5 years there.
You can see
But
that.
it's
But what did I
4.
use?
Yeah.
So I've removed 1 from that 5 years. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
In the second one, you see that in the second one, we're given 4 years, Abby. Did I remove 1 from
Yes.
that 4? No.
No. Oh, okay,
So
that's what you're saying.
it's not, it's not this one that I'm referring to. I'm referring to that
okay.
1 over n. Yeah, thank you. So that is good. Please, when you have questions, stop me immediately and ask a question. That is the best approach to tackle SFN. Okay, thank you. So Gordon's growth rate tells us that G is equal to what? RB. Now, what is R? What is B? R represents return on equity. Return on what? Return on equity. What's equity? Equity is shares. Return on equity. So when we say return on equity is the percentage return that our equity, our ordinary shares, yield during a particular period. Okay? And what is the return to equity holder? The return to equity holders is the profit after tax. Okay? However, if there is preference share dividend, we are going to remove it. I'm going to explain that later. So profit after tax is the return available to equity holders. Do you understand? So I will say my R is equal to profit after tax, which is our part, all over. You now look at what equity did you use that gave rise to this profit after tax? That will be your denominator. So I will have equity, okay, plus opening balance of reserve. Opening balance of what? Opening balance of reserve. Now let me explain this. When we say, let us assume that we in year 2020 now, okay, December 2020. And in December 2020, I made a profit after tax, okay? I made a profit after tax of, let me say let me use small figure of 1,000, okay? Let me use small figure just for illustration. And in year 2019, okay? In year 2019, 31st December 2019, okay? That's the beginning of 2020, right? You know, this is the end of 2019. The end of 2019 is the beginning of what? Is the beginning of 2020. Are we together? So if this is the case, and in that 31st December 2019, in my statement of financial position, I have retained earnings of, let me say, 1,200. Please, I believe you are following. I want to explain this opening balance of retained, so that opening balance of reserve, so that you understand it clearly. And of course, in year 2020, I paid dividend. Of 300 naira. Now, if I pay dividend of 300 naira after the 1,000 naira profit I made in 2020, I will have retained profit of what? I will have retained profit of 700. It means that on 31/12/2020, my total retained earnings should be what? Retained earning at the beginning of the year, which is what? 1,200 plus what? Plus retained earnings in year 2020, which is what? 700. So it means in my statement of financial position, at the end of year 2020, I will report my retained earnings to be what? 1,900. If you understand it up to this stage, let me see your yes. Up to this stage. If you understand it up to that stage, let me see your yes, please. Before I continue what I want to explain now. If you got it, you understood it up to this point, let me see your yes. Okay. Okay, Mrs. Chinwe, thank you. Mrs. Angela and Mrs. Sheung, did you? You don't understand it up to that level?
Yes, I get it,
okay.
Sir.
Okay, thank you. Now, you know equity is capital. Equity is part of your capital. Now, I want to ask you, the equity that gave you this
question,
profit,
sir.
Okay, we are go ahead.
I didn't get that one line.
The last one, Abi?
Yes, sir.
Now, let me repeat it again. You see that this what? 31st December 2019, Abi? And on 31st December 2019, in my statement of financial position, I have retained earning of what? 1,200. Okay? But in year 2020, I made a profit of what? Profit after tax of 1,000 naira. This profit after tax, I can use it in two ways. Is either I retain everything, or I pay dividend, part of it as dividend, and I retain the balance. So I'm now saying that let us assume that out of this 1,000 naira that we made in year 2020, the company paid dividend of what? 300. If the company paid dividend of 300, it means the company is retaining what? In 2020, the company is retaining earnings. Retained earnings will be what? Will be 700. The company is retaining 700 out of this 1,000. Now, don't forget that at the end of 31st December 2020, when you want to report your retained earnings in the statement of financial position, the retained earnings you are going to report is the opening retained earnings plus what? Retained earnings for the year. That is what gave us this what? 1,900. Did you understand now? Now, but the fact is that when we come to this profit, this 1,000 naira here, was this 700 part of what we use for our business to get this 1,000 naira? Let me come again. In 2020, we have retained earning of 700. That retained earning we have in 700 there, was it part of what we used to generate this 1,000? Was it part of the capital we used to get this 1,000 in year 2020? Please, let me unmute you so that you can answer that my question. You can unmute and answer that question. Was this 700 part of what we use? No. The answer is no. Do you know the reason why it is no? The reason why it is no is that
No, sir.
the capital you use for your business, we have to be capital that what? You start the business at the beginning of the year, Abby. We have to the capital at the beginning of the year. So the capital at the beginning of the year is what? Is 1,200, not 1,900. So if you are given statement of financial position on this date and you are seeing 1,900, it means that is what? Closing balance. That is not opening balance. This is the opening balance. This is the closing balance. You understand? The question will not give you this. In the question, you will not be given this. Can you see that? The question will only give you what? Closing balance. So in this formula, what you need is what? Is opening balance. So how will you get your opening balance? You will say closing balance minus the retained earning for the year. Okay? So my closing balance, sorry, my opening balance, which is what? Balance on when? 1/1/2020, Abby? 1/1/2020 will be equal to the closing balance of 1,900 minus the retained earning for the year, which is what? 700. This will give me what? This will give me 1,200. So that is what we have as what? Opening balance of reserve. It is the opening balance of reserve you need. The question will give you closing balance. So if the question gives you closing balance, go and look for the what? For the retained earning for that year and remove it from the closing balance so that you get your opening balance. Did we understand this, please? Did we get this? Eh?
Yes.
Okay. So if we get this, let us continue. Now, our equity is the equity, the normal equity in ordinary shares, the way you have it in what? In your statement of financial position. Ordinary share does not change, okay? So except if there's new issue. So ordinary shares, you pick it the way it is given in the statement of financial position. The only thing you need to adjust is what? Is the reserve. So divide the profit after tax by the equity and what? And the reserve. And multiply your result by what? By 100. That is what we call return on equity. Okay? That's what we call return on equity. And the second one there is what? B. What does our B represent? Our B represent proportion of earnings retained. We change this. Okay. B represents proportion of earnings retained. Proportion of earnings retained. When we say proportion of earnings retained, we are talking about profit after tax minus dividend. Okay, minus dividend. Then you now say over what? Profit after tax. Okay, times 100. Now look at it. You know here we made a profit of what? 1,000, Abi? And we pay dividend of what? 300. So our retaining is 700. If I want to get the proportion of earnings retained, I will just say that 700 all over profit after tax. I will get the proportion of earnings retained. So when I multiply that proportion of earnings retained here by the return on equity, I get my growth rate. It's as simple as that. I get my growth rate. Do we have question on this? Do we have question on this before we continue? Mrs. Angela. Yeah, question, Abi?